Okay, so in the terms of the overall background of the stock take, the objectives are up on the screen, and basically the stock taking exercise, the main objective was to feed two major products here at the global level. The first is the development of strategic guidance on public finance for children work, which we are currently developing. And the second is to help inform a new learning program on PF4C. So all the information that we've been collecting and analyzing about our work in PF4C is being used and channeled into these two higher level processes. In terms of the methodology, we started off, first of all, just doing a desk-based review of information that was available on the internet. And I would just say here that one of the main challenges is that there is no one-stop shop to get information on PF4C. So we first started by scanning the internet to get all the information that we could. We then went through all of the country office annual reports for the last 2 years. A targeted number of country offices, and we got about 31 responses. And overall, we were trying to capture information on PF4C activities that were carried out between 2009 and 2013. So let me just start by talking about some of the key concepts that have developed throughout this process. First of all, PF4C describes UNICEF's efforts to increase the transparency, the efficiency, and the equity of public investments in children. And we can see that these four outcomes can be broken down. The first is transparency, and transparency is trying to figure out how much is being spent on children. So first, we're trying to access budget information and then understand how much of the overall spending is actually going toward children. The second area here is efficiency. And efficiency has several components. One, for example, is are sectoral allocations being fully utilized. So, for example, if a Ministry of Health is only expending 75% of its budget, it's obviously being inefficient because there's 25% of the resources which are not being used and potentially to support children. A second area of efficiency is to look at the overall composition of expenditures. So this is looking at things, what percent of the budget is being spent on wages versus capital investments like in infrastructure and goods. Another area of efficiency is to see if different processes and products could be achieved at a lower cost. So here we're trying to see if we can achieve more output for each given input. A third concept is equity, and equity is all about the distribution of how resources are being spent. And here we're concerned about, first of all, the geography. So how is spending affecting different regions? How is spending impacting rural versus urban populations? Then we can look at the different specific groups. So we can drill down into gender, male versus female. We can drill down to different minority groups. So are some groups benefiting more than other groups? And of course, we can also drill down by age to see how children are being affected by public spending. And the last area is adequacy. And adequacy is about understanding, is the overall volume of resources enough to satisfy or achieve the rights of children? So is the overall spending envelope enough to support children? And here we're looking at the overall priorities of how a budget is put together. We're also looking at effective allocation and perhaps exploring different ways where governments could expand the overall fiscal space to increase investments in children. Just a couple of other quick considerations when talking about public finance for children. I think it's important to note that public finance for children, first of all, the name that we use, PF4C, we have adapted because this is being widely used in the field. But we also see that PF4C goes beyond, it's more comprehensive than previous approaches like social budgeting or child responsive budgeting. And we see that because, first of all, PF4C is concerned not just about the spending side, but also the revenue side of public finance. And PF4C also recognizes that the overall budget has implications on the macro economy. So the overall budget will impact levels of employment. It will impact things like income distribution. It will impact things like price levels, and all of these have indirect impacts on children. So we see PF4C as being very comprehensive, as looking at both the revenue and the spending side, and the overall potential impacts that a budget may have on a macroeconomy. Now, as we were going through the country office annual reports, we tried to pull out a lot of evidence on why this work is important. And as we went through the past 2 years of country office annual reports, we got a ton of examples, in the words of country offices, and why budgets are barriers to achieving child rights. And I'm not going to go through this list right here, but there's several examples on the screen right now which identify how inefficient, inequitable, and inadequate spending are adversely affecting the fulfillment of child rights. And we have a huge database which we are going to share on the community of practice also. So in terms of trying to understand how all of UNICEF's intervention fulfill child rights, we're trying to understand how the very diverse approaches that are being applied at the country office level, we put together what we call a PF4C pathway of change. And the PF4C pathway of change illustrates how specific PF4C implementation strategies and interventions lead to intermediate outcomes. And these, in turn, contribute to desired PF4C outcomes and ultimately the fulfillment of rights. Overall, this framework, we tried to make this very user-friendly in the sense that we're trying to answer programmatic questions on the how. So what is the strategy? How do we implement PF4C? The what specific activities? And the why, what are the expected outcomes from the strategies and the activities that we're carrying out? And overall, the PF4C pathway of change centers on 3 core components of interventions, which are then supported by these 3 unique implementation strategies. And we're now quickly going to go over the main components. So we've got information on PF4C activities in 116 country offices, and we put all this information together to try and understand what are the main interventions that are carried out to implement PF4C. And so we can first classify them in these 3 components. The 3 components are first, assessment, second, engagement, and third, budget monitoring and tracking. And each of these core components have a series of main interventions that we've identified. And so I'm going to go through each of these very briefly here, and I will just mention that in the stock take report itself, each of these are presented in very detailed level, and we have many country examples to support each of these for reference. So our first major intervention is aggregate child-focused budget analyses. And this is really the most dominant activity that we see at the country level in the area of PF4C. And what these are trying to do is to identify the overall level of spending in children. And this typically is carried out by looking at the national budget and identifying the major sectors that impact children, so typically health, education, and social protection, and trying to quantify the overall level. Now, there's obviously a wide variety of methodologies that are used to carry out these types of analyses, and the more comprehensive ones will drill down into direct and indirect impacts and go to each line item in the budget, and they will even assign different weights. And all of that information is used to aggregate up to get an overall size of spending in children. A second major intervention is costing, and we see costing exercises that are carried out across all sectors, and they're used to estimate the cost of increasing coverage and the quality of interventions, as well as programs, sectors, policies, and plans. And costing exercises try to answer a variety of questions, such as what new actions are needed, for whom, by whom, how, and so on. And we see that more than 70 country offices have been recently involved in costing exercises, making it the second most widespread PF4C activity. A third common intervention under this first component is what we call the financial impact of scaling up. And this is basically where UNICEF pilots an activity, usually in several communities, and then it carefully documents the costs as well as the benefits of that specific intervention and what the implications would be to scale that up at a regional or national level. A fourth major intervention under this first component is modeling. And modeling we see are used for a variety of issues. Usually these take place when a policy proposal or reform is being put forward by a parliament, and UNICEF will commission a study to understand the impacts of that proposed reform, as well as the fiscal costs to introduce any safeguard measures that would be necessary to protect children from the adverse impacts of a reform. And one of the most common activities in this area has been looking at fuel subsidy reforms, which we've seen across the Middle East and West Africa. A fifth and final major intervention under the first component is investment cases. And investment cases there's basically two types. One is a cost benefit, which tries to estimate the overall long-term social and economic impacts of a particular set of interventions, as well as the cost of inaction, which does the same thing but tries to estimate the cost to society for not intervening. And we see that 16 country offices have been recently involved in this area. Moving on to the second component of PF4C, we see that about 100 country offices have been recently involved in engaging in two areas, and we break this down to plans and strategies as well as budgets. And UNICEF is often engaging to ensure that the financing aspects of poverty reduction strategy papers, national development plans, sector and cross-sectoral plans, etc., are sensitive to children's needs. And we also intervene into various entry points throughout the budget cycle to impact how the budget is put together and implemented, which we call here budget frameworks. So we can see that virtually 100 country offices have been very active in this area in the last 5 years. Moving on to the third and final component of PF4C, which is budget monitoring and tracking. The first major intervention here is routine aggregate child-focused budget analyses. And this is basically applying the one-off exercise that we saw under the first component, applying that same methodology on a recurring basis, which could be every 6 months, once a year, once every 2 years, to understand how the overall volume of spending is evolving over time. A second major intervention here is public expenditure reviews, PERs, and these build on the overall aggregate budget analysis, and they first identify the overall spending, but then they drill down into a very detailed analysis of a sector, of a specific sector, which could be health, education, social protection, and so on. And they try and look and assess the overall quality of spending as well as the equity of spending, and this typically involves linking sectoral spending to the overall macroeconomic environment, as well as carrying out different types of benefits incidence analyses to understand how sectoral spending is actually having an effect on the targeted populations. And just a heads up, our next webinar, which we are planning for the end of September, we will be presenting child-focused public expenditure reviews together with the World Bank, so just to note that. A third area, or a third intervention that's being widely applied in the field is public expenditure tracking surveys, also known as PETs. And PETs try to assess the efficiency of financial flows at the facility level. And basically, a PETs is trying to reconcile what the national government says is dispersed in terms of financial flows and to see what actually arrives to the facility level. And that information is also complemented by qualitative information to understand how that spending is actually being utilized and the quality of spending at the facility level. And we can see that this is actually a very new area for UNICEF. There's only been about 5 country offices that have participated in a completed PETS, but this year we have at least 6 country offices that are planned to carry out a PETS, so it's a very fast-growing area and a tool that's gaining lots of interest from our field offices. So let's take a step back now and look at some of the key trends that emerge from the stock take. A first key trend that we can see is that PF4C work is as universal as UNICEF's mandate. So as we can see here, it's being applied across all regions, it's being across all country income groups, and it's being applied also very widely in fragile situations. A second key trend is that PF4C is a core programmatic approach in almost 50% of our country offices. And this means that country offices are applying at least two of the major components of PF4C. On this next graph, we can see the incidence of overall specific interventions. And as we discussed earlier, we can see that budget analyses are the most widely applied activity at the country office level. And there's also lots of engagement in plans and strategies, as well as in budgetary frameworks. We can see that PF4C is being applied across all sectors. So it's not just the cross-cutting social policy feature. Much of this work is also being carried out in specific sectors, often together with the support of social policy colleagues. We can see that activities at the national level are increasingly being complemented by engagement at the subnational level. And we have a whole annex that's dedicated to looking at PF4C at local levels. And this is clearly an area that has undergone lots of recent growth. Another major trend is working on the revenue side. And this can involve more or less engaging in 4 different areas. The first area is conducting a fiscal space analysis to identify potential new sources of revenue that could be channeled towards children. A second area here is engaging in extractive industries. A third area is looking at the potential use of fiscal savings from subsidy reforms. And a fourth area is looking at tax reforms and structures to make sure that they are child sensitive as well as pro-poor. Another key trend is the prevalence of PF4C in fragile situations. And overall, we found nearly 40 country offices that are considered fragile or considered working in fragile environments are implementing PF4C strategies. And you can see here on the graph that that's most prevalent in Isaro and Wakaro, but also across all regions. And lastly, we can see that there is an increasing demand for UNICEF to engage in PF4C. And we can see that PFM and budget-related bottlenecks are common drivers of inequities in children, which requires a program response from UNICEF, which acts as a push factor. And there's also a very strong demand factor, which comes out of the PF4C survey, where 70% of country offices identified that governments, donors, and civil society are increasing their demand for UNICEF to get engaged in PF4C. So we see both a push and a pull factor to increase UNICEF's overall engagement in public finance for children work. So what can we say about the impacts of our engagement so far? If we take a step back and look at all of the documents that discuss our activities in PF4C, we can see that about 50% of the country offices that have been engaged in PF4C have some type of documented evidence where their efforts have led to enhanced transparency, better quality, and or greater investments in children. So we do see that UNICEF's efforts have achieved very positive outcomes. And in the stocktake report, we have a section that talks about the impacts. And I'm not going to discuss the country examples now, but I will just mention that we have documented many case studies. Several of those are in the stocktake, but we have many more that will also be featured in our community of practice. And we can see here examples from China, from Mozambique, from Ghana, and from Somalia. But in terms of the main takeaways about our overall impact in PF4C, we can see that there are concrete challenges to documenting our effectiveness in this area. A lot of country offices mainly invest in the aggregate type of budget analysis, but do not really report or document how that information is actually used to impact a budget or a strategic process. Many country offices that have been engaged in PF4C for a longer period of time may have not tracked progress due to a mix of human or financial constraints. A lot of times we see that many sectors are engaged in PF4C, but oftentimes built which may limit the overall impact. And among the country offices that do demonstrate very strong results, it's difficult to gauge the overall long-term impact because many of these initiatives are often new and still evolving and take a long time to demonstrate results. In terms of some of the key lessons that emerge from the stocktake, these can basically be aggregated together to form kind of 4 higher level areas where we can focus on. The first is leadership, and it's clear that we need to have better awareness and support from our senior management on the role and potential of PF4C. Obviously, a big challenge is always human and financial resources. A third area is technical capacity, and we need to make sure that our staff are equipped with the right skill set to really take this work forward. And another major challenge is just having access to the right decision makers in terms of counterparts, as well as having access to detailed budget information. We can also distill a series of ingredients of success of our efforts in PF4C. And these can be lumped together into kind of 2 major categories. The first is the need for long-term planning and sustained efforts in this area. It's clear that for PF4C to thrive, it requires multiple interventions that are positioned within a pathway of change that are planned for over a long time horizon. We can also see that there's a need for much more robust budget monitoring and tracking, which is the third PF4C component. And we can also see the importance of not just long-term planning, but also being very flexible to open up to very brief windows of opportunity, which could come through an election. It could come through an informal encounter with a politician or with a partner from the World Bank or the IMF or so on. We can also see that for PF4C to succeed, we need to have the right mix of knowledge, the right mix of staff, the right mix of resources, and the right partners. And the stocktake report has an entire section that talks about all of these areas, and I would encourage all of you to have a look through there. So if we step back from the stocktake, what are some of the key takeaways that we can identify? First is, again, we put forth a working definition for PF4C, which describes UNICEF's efforts to influence the transparency, the efficiency, the equity, and the adequacy of public investments in children. A second key takeaway is that PF4C is a critical building block toward achieving equitable results for children. And again, this reflects the increasing recognition that the budget and PFM processes are a major driver of disparities among children, and that UNICEF must take action to address gaps in financing and to ensure that funds are reaching the most disadvantaged children and their families. A third key takeaway is that PF4C takes a wide variety of shapes and forms and is being applied in all types of country contexts. And here again, the PF4C pathway of change helps us to understand, to classify, and to see how these different activities do contribute to desired outcomes. A fourth key takeaway is that PF4C has achieved significant positive outcomes for children, but there's also a significant potential to do a lot more, and we've identified a lot of specific ways in which country offices can adapt their programs to maximize results for children in this area. And lastly, it's very clear that headquarters and regional offices can do a lot to help carry out more systematic management of good practices and knowledge in this area, which is a prerequisite for taking results to scale. In terms of the next steps here at headquarters, we are now initiating a PF4C webinar series, of which the stocktake is the first webinar. Next month, we will be having a webinar that will feature child-focused public expenditure reviews, and we will have 2 country offices share their experiences as well as the World Bank. This will also be an opportunity for us to present and get technical feedback on a series of notes that we're developing, which is the guidance that will describe the how-to and the good practices for the different PF4C interventions. A second area that we are launching is a community of practice for PF4C, and currently we are designing a platform. If anybody is interested in providing feedback and having a look at our initial design, I would encourage you to please get in touch with Nima Falah, and we can give you access to that, and we would very much value your feedback. We will be launching this officially next month in September, so please be on the lookout for an invitation. A third area is strategic guidance on PF4C. As I mentioned at the onset, this stocktake report, most of this information is being directly channeled into the development of strategic guidance, and we are about to initiate a series of virtual and in-person consultations to get feedback and to really help us design this with the field in mind. And lastly, we have just released a request for proposals to develop a new training program on PF4C. And we hope that we can start designing these modules in the 4th quarter of this year. And we would expect to have the new training program operational, which would include a series of online modules as well as in-person workshops at some point in the mid-2015, so next year. So just in conclusion, first of all, thanks very much for tuning in and for your interest in this area. We will share the reports as well as a recording of this webinar to you shortly. And I also want to say that we are still opening, the process is still open to solicit feedback, so if you have any comments, right now we're going to have a quick discussion where you can provide feedback either here in the webinar or through email, and we are happy to incorporate further comments before we finalize this report. So I will now pass the mic over to Nima, who is going to facilitate our hopefully interactive discussion. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Matthew, for doing the on time. Most. So now we're going to have this discussion session, but before that, please submit your questions, comments, anything on the box, and we're gonna address those questions. Then we move to the discussion and mainly on these 3 topics that you can see. So we have a discussion on how well were sector-based activities captured by global stocktake. That's the first question. And the second one is what is the best way to get further information on the strategic aspects of UNICEF's experience in PF4C. And the third one is about what do staff need to do this work effectively. So these are the kind of main 3 discussion topics that we would like to hear from you. And but before that, we have received 2 comments actually here. One from Julia, I guess. It's about the pets in Macedonia. And from Luis about MBB. So
we can just open it up. I mean, this was just These are questions.
Okay, so
yeah, so if anybody has any comments, please feel free to either text or you can state your interest in speaking in the text box, and we will assign your microphone, or we will deactivate your microphone so you can address the group. I've got a question. Let's read that question.
So,
that's the question. Yeah, that's a question.
Yeah. So we have a question asking, so thanks for the great presentation. What types of capacity gaps have been identified for staff so that development of training modules? Thank you.
We can do the next question.
And the second question, at the country level, country office level, we need support from RO and headquarters in establishing partnerships with the bank and regional banks, especially in Latin America. In Peru, we have good relationship in discussion, but we have not managed to partner in with them on PF4C. So the issue with the government and banks. And would you like to speak briefly on 2 points? Which points?
Okay, thanks, Aliyah, for your first question on the capacity gaps. In addition to the stocktake report, earlier this year we commissioned Anthony Hodges, who was a longtime social policy advisor for UNICEF and worked in many country offices. He carried out a review of an existing program that we have for PF4C. He also looked at other training programs from the World Bank, as well as sector-based programs at UNICEF that talk about or address financing issues. And we also consulted with a number of country offices, and he put together a very detailed proposal for how the new training program should look, which reflects the main capacity gaps that we've identified at the country office. And basically, what's emerged is that we need better information on understanding how a PFM system is put together and managed. We need better knowledge and awareness about the macroeconomic implications of the budget. We need better information on budget policy and resources. We need better information on public expenditure as well as local governance. So these 5 areas are what we've identified thus far, and which is the training proposal that's being put forward right now. Anna from Peru is talking about the partnerships with the World Bank as well as regional development banks. And what I can say here from headquarters is that we are working very closely with the World Bank team that's based in PREM, the team that's responsible for doing public expenditure reviews and working on PFM issues. And if you're having any difficulties engaging at the country office level, we are very happy to contact our colleagues at headquarters at the World Bank and see if they can help facilitate a dialogue at the country level. And as I mentioned earlier, our next webinar will be on child-focused public expenditure reviews. The team from the World Bank will actually be presenting at that during that webinar, and so it'll be a great chance for us to have an interactive dialogue with them to see how we can better engage World Bank country offices on the ground. So thanks very much for that question, and again, please feel free to follow up with us here at headquarters and also to participate in the next webinar, which will be a chance to actually have a conversation with World Bank headquarters.
Thank you. So we have received just 2 more questions. Juan Enrique, I want to know if the sessions have the opportunity to review documents with the series post.
Okay, Juan, your question on the Contamos series from Guatemala. Let me first say that the objective of the stock take was not to identify every PF4C activity in every country office, which obviously is an impossible objective. The idea and the main objective of the stock take was to get a representative sample of what UNICEF is doing in PF4C across different country typologies, regions, and income groups. And so we did not capture every activity that's being carried out. Contamos, I am aware of that, and I have seen those bulletins. Again, the child-focused budget analysis is the most common activity. We have almost 100 examples of those that are being carried out across UNICEF country offices. So we did come across that series. I will say that as part of the community of practice, as this is being developed right now, one of the key aspects of this is to have a very comprehensive information portal. And here we hope to work very closely with all country offices to get information on all activities that are being carried out at the country office level, which would include any terms of references that have been developed and shared, any studies, any policy notes, etc. And so we are hoping to develop an extremely robust and comprehensive database that does capture, in fact, every activity across the UNICEF global organization. And so we hope to work very closely with all of the country offices to get that information from you. And so as we extend our invitation to join the community of practice in September at some point, we do hope to work with you guys to get all the information uploaded in one common spot. So thanks very much for that comment.
Thank you. I'd like to ask about it would be interesting to investigate the incentives that certain administrations would have in disclosing data on taking part in PF4C, and based on this analysis, prepare to get advocacy on PF4C.
Let me respond to that one.
Yeah.
No, just read them all. You can read them all.
So, Anjali asked, thank you for the after PF4C after from the national level, we exercise at the subnational level, especially for countries that are working with local bodies and promoting child-friendly local governance at the subnational level.
Mateo, thanks very much for your comments. Indeed, one of the key themes that have emerged is how do we do effective advocacy with our key counterparts in this area, and we can see that UNICEF, when it works in this area, we have a lot of very diverse technical and political counterparts, which would involve very unique advocacy strategies. So, for example, when we're working with the parliaments, it's very much a policy process, and we're dealing with elected bodies who have to design legislation that we're trying to make child sensitive. On the other side, a lot of our technical counterparts in the Ministry of Finance or in the line ministry, these are responsible for the nuts and bolts of how that money, how the resources that are allocated to a sector are going to be implemented. And so we have very unique strategies for trying to work with both of these. I will say that we have a policy advocacy units that actually used to be part of our section, but was just moved elsewhere as part of a restructuring that just took place at headquarters. But we are working very closely with them. We are actually seeking financing from the Gates Foundation to put together a advocacy-based module that's just focused on budget work. And so this is actually a concept that's in the pipeline, and we hope that we will have something, if not part of the overall training program that we're getting together, that would be a separate module. So that's definitely being planned and discussed here at the HQ level. And thanks very much for that comments. In terms of engaging at the subnational level, the comment from Anjali, and how that would differ from engaging at the national level, it's a very good question, and dynamics at the local level are clearly very different, especially in terms of the overall power structure that's at the local level. And so we can see the first major distinction is how intense is decentralization in terms of administration, political, and fiscal. And just the level of decentralization will already have a big impact on how you can engage in subnational policy-making strategies and budgets. We've actually just had a decentralization specialist join the team here at headquarters. Her name is Mariah, and right now she's actually carrying out a stock taking of our work at the subnational level. The stock take that we've just finished and presented here today is much more nationally focused, although we did capture some subnational activities. But she is going to do a very similar exercise, only looking at the decentralized subnational piece. And so I would encourage you to get in touch with her. You can feel free to contact Nima and I, and we will put you in touch with her. And we will be developing a specific guidance note on engagement at the subnational level. So that is being that is in the pipeline here at headquarters. But thanks very much for that question.
So thank you. Any relevant country office experience in social budgeting? Albert, thank you. Quality of pets in context with management.
Let me go for a time. Let me take this in. Albert, thanks very much for your question on the pets, and he makes the comment that the strategy is usually used to make governments being open to work on PF4C, especially weak. Okay, so Albert's point is about pets. Now, as I mentioned earlier, to date we've only seen about 5 country offices that have actually participated in a completed pets exercise. But this year we have 6 country offices who are either already in the process or planning to implement a PETS. So it's a very exciting area and one that's growing very quickly. And Albert is very correct to point out that especially in environments where there is little or no information or where administrative information is very weak, a PETS can be a very effective exercise to go in and figure out what's happening at really the place that we care most about, which is the service delivery point. So yes, it can be a fantastic strategy to engage in environments where there is not a lot of data available. And thanks very much for that question. This is from Alexander Souza. Okay, Alexandra is asking about our engagement with the World Bank here at headquarters level. So I'm sure many of you have seen that the World Bank has gone through a massive restructuring over the past few months. And so at the end of last year, we took a trip to Washington, D.C. with all of the social policy regional advisors. We had a discussion to kind of talk about what UNICEF was doing in the area of public finance and potentially how we could link with our World Bank colleagues in the field. Regrettably, we lost some of the momentum from that meeting due to the restructuring because there was lots of uncertainty in where certain responsibilities would end up. But the new restructure has just been released, and we are now going to engage with their public financial management cluster, what it's being called. And so right now we are doing a joint note with them on how to carry out a child-sensitive public expenditure review. So they are one of our peer reviews, and they're also contributing to help us strengthen the technical aspects of that. And from their side, they're very happy to engage and help open doors for colleagues at the country level to team up with the World Bank. So what we're hoping is that our engagement at the headquarters level will create opportunities for our country offices to at least open up a dialogue with colleagues in the field. So we will have more information in the next webinar about this collaboration, and we'll look forward to following up with you in that regard.
Thank you. Amadou asked about the experience in working with the parliaments and child-responsive budgeting.
Amadou, thanks very much for your comments on working with parliaments in child-responsive budgeting. Yes, there's a lot of activity going on in this, and we've actually just commissioned a research project to the Institute of Development Studies, who is going to review all of our engagement with Parliament to first look at, or he's going to review external experiences of engaging parliaments. So identify best practices that have been identified in all types of organizations and environments. And then he's also doing a detailed review of our experiences in UNICEF. And that information is going to feed a specific technical note on how to engage effectively with parliaments on budget issues. So this will be one of the technical notes that's featured as part of our overall strategic guidance, and that is a key output that is already in the process. So thanks very much for that comment.
So Kelly asked about the partnership with the UNCDP and UNDP, as well, the PET exercise.
Okay, in terms of the PETs and Angelique's question about how we are engaging with other UN agencies as well as the Asian Development Bank, do you have any insight into this, Nima?
Well,
so let me just say, our colleague here, Nima, he's been putting together case studies on our interventions with PETs, so he's best positioned to answer this question.
Well, for this PETs exercise, I guess there was some work with the World Bank, but I haven't seen with UNCDP and ADB. I haven't seen any exercise so far. So maybe this year with these 16 countries, as part of the plan, they might have this partnership, I guess. So we can keep this.
Okay, thanks. Sandy, in terms of having a database of consultants and TORs at headquarters, obviously there's been a huge demand and many requests for this. As part of our PF4C community of practice, this is one of the key features. As part of the stock-taking exercise, we have come across and compiled a number of TORs and consultants, but the next phase is really to reach out to every country office and to develop a very robust database that will be accessible to all country offices. So the database will start with the information that we've come across through carrying out this stocktake, and that will be complemented, we hope, by participation from country offices to furnish this information and provide it within the community of practice. So that is definitely an activity that's forthcoming. Sonia, would you like to take the floor? Let me give you...
There we go. Yes. Very quickly, I think actually some points had been made on the difficulties for countries to open up their books and somehow the resistance in showing up, basically maybe some shortfalls in what they're doing. And what I've been very engaged in the whole issues about the post-2015 Sustainable Development Agenda. And what I noted is, I know because I was engaged at the regional level, there's a call for each region, in fact, to open up the accountability framework. Accountability means specifically to engage citizens at all levels, at national, global, regional, national, and even local level. Engage everybody in somehow providing input, but also monitoring and implementing. And I think that this is a golden opportunity for PF4C somehow to partner with and try to indicate and empower people that they have a right under that framework. They need to engage also on public financial for children. In fact, I make that comment because in your reports, you had indicated where basically the relevance at different level of different specific is in the table on page 24, table 5. In others, beyond social policy, you had put certain things without the click, in particular in regard to governance. And with that in mind, immediately I thought, okay, in that framework, in fact, there's even more rational to engage more broadly various stakeholders beyond people of social policy and beyond governments. Thank you.
Thank you, Sonia.
Hi, Sonia. Thanks for that comment. I think, yeah, you're definitely spot on, and we do see that, you know, in many countries, a major challenge is, you know, it's a closed budget process, right? The books are closed, and information is not published, and there's not opportunities to engage. And as we saw in our definition of PF4C, the first feature of our work is transparency, which is is also, obviously strongly linked to accountability, and having citizens as well as children be able to participate in the process, right? Making it an open process. What we've seen actually is there hasn't been a lot of UNICEF involvement in supporting civil society in the budget process. There was, I think, 4 or 5 instances of where UNICEF has supported directly the participation of children in the budget process, but the reviews of those experiences have not been very positive. That's not to say that this is not a very important area and shouldn't be a priority moving forward. It shows that it hasn't been an area that's been very intensely explored at the field level across the organization. In terms of the current note that we have commissioned to the Institute of Development Studies on parliaments, there will also be a key aspect of how we can work with civil society to engage the parliaments. So that will be a feature of that technical note that's being developed right now. And that's also being jointly written by the civil society sector here at headquarters. So we will definitely try to better emphasize the role of civil society in that and see what we can tease out. But thanks very much for that very great comment.
Thank you. And we have lots of questions actually. Rachel asked about the future ongoing work with parliaments, parliamentarians. So,
okay, Rachel was asking about if we can share ongoing work with parliamentarians. We did a review of the country reports to extract specific examples of where parliaments or where UNICEF is working with a parliament on budget issues. I have a short note that I'm happy to share with you, Rachel, if that would be of interest, so let me know. Also, that information has already been incorporated into the stocktake report. It's in, I think, Annex 4 is part of the country examples and how we are engaging in budget processes and engaging in strategic plans. So that's also featured in many of the examples that we provided in the annexes of the stocktake. Angeli asks, what tools are being used to conduct budget analysis? That's a great question. It's obviously, as I mentioned, the aggregate child-focused budget analysis is the most widespread activity that's being applied. There are a wide variety of methodologies. I mean, there's not one standardized way to do it because there are many considerations which depend on the data availability, which depend on how child-focused or child-sensitive investments are defined at the national level, which depend on which classifications are looked at. So there's many considerations. We actually are putting together a note that is synthesizing all of the different evidence and experiences that we have. And this will be part of the technical guidance that's coming out. So we will be able to share a very detailed analysis of all of the different aspects that could or should be considered in a child-focused budget analysis, and that will be forthcoming. In addition, going to the next level of the more aggregate analysis, we have the public expenditure review, which is much more focused on beneficiary incidence analysis. So that's seeing how the spending is impacting different groups, regions, etc. So that's also in the pipeline, and that's going to be a tool for the overall aggregate analysis. So those are both coming in the fourth series of technical notes.
Anything what?
Okay, so Luis is talking about his experience in the Democratic Republic of Congo. He says he's working with the IMF, and he's working with the IMF as well as the Ministry of Finance and Health and Education, and trying to add a conditionality in the new IMF facility arrangement. That's fantastic. I mean, we've seen in the last 2 years a very increasing incidence of UNICEF engagement with the IMF, which can involve UNICEF joining hands on the missions when they come to the country, which could involve providing inputs to the Article 4 consultation reports. So it's a very encouraging sign to hear that from the DRC. Obviously, the IMF is a very strategic partner, especially can be very helpful in trying to get a seat at the table or gain access to key decision makers within the Ministry of Finance. Several years ago at headquarters, we piloted an initiative here at headquarters with the IMF to promote collaboration on the ground. That has kind of fizzled at the headquarter level, but we're still happy to see that there are many activities still ongoing at the country level of where UNICEF is engaging with the IMF. So thanks very much for sharing that experience with us. Iraz is asking for some examples from other CEOs of expert CVs because they are strategizing in this work area. Iraz, if you can send me an email and let me know the specific type of profile that you're looking for, I'm happy to share what we have here at headquarters. Again, as part of our community of practice that we are launching next month, we hope to tap into the resources of every country office across the UNICEF family to get good profiles of experts, as well as to get great terms of references and examples of studies and approaches, etc. So we very much look forward to teaming up with the country offices to get this information and have a very robust database available to our field staff. So thanks for that. Okay, Jing Ching Chai, who is the chief of the Public Finance and Local Governance Unit here at HQ, has noted that the World Bank just launched a knowledge network on PFM for service delivery, and that UNICEF has been invited to participate. She is going to represent UNICEF as an expert in the body, and she welcomes any staff. So if anybody is interested in also participating in this, please do get in contact with us, and we will loop you in. Armando says he had troubles hearing because of technical difficulties. Yes, we will be sharing a video recording. Amadou says in Rwanda they are working with the World Bank to produce a series of economic updates to inform development of child-sensitive economic policies. That is fantastic, Amadou, and we look forward to sharing that experiences with our field office colleagues, both through the community of practice and through subsequent webinars. Okay, Sandy's asking about fundraising. Could we also jointly advocate for more 7% set aside for this type of work with everyone? Sandy, that's a great comment. Yes, we can definitely discuss that here at the HQ level. Yeah, Luis is noting that it may be useful to treat countries differently according to their level of income and development. For example, in the DRC, the government is having troubles paying salaries. Luis raises a very critical issue is when should PF4C be applied and what types of environments? Are certain situations better suited for others to apply certain interventions? Are there preconditions that must be in place so that PF4C can flourish and take off? And I can assure you, Luis, that as we are developing our strategic guidance here at headquarters, we are taking the idea of country typologies very much into consideration, and our guidance will be structured around proposing a series of advisable or recommended interventions for different situations. So we are definitely taking account for the different types of environments through which UNICEF is operating. Yes, Jing Ching is responding to Sandy and mentioning the fact that we do have a fundraising task force that's led by Alexander Euster, who is the Associate Director of the Social Inclusion Section. And fantastic, yes, it will be great if we can have country offices join forces, and we're happy to follow up with you. Gabi from Peru talks about that she agrees with Luis. PF4C strategies must be contextualized for different contexts. We fully agree here, and this is definitely a key piece that's helping us to structure the guidance as it's being developed. Albert is talking about how his country office in Togo is trying to establish a platform with the World Bank and the IMF to monitor budgets. That is fantastic. Yes, we came across many examples from Togo about trying to institutionalize a routine budget analysis as part of the annual government budget. It's a very fantastic innovation, and we very much look forward to tapping into the experience from Togo, both in a technical note that we'll be putting together that actually looks at budget tagging and kind of real-time monitoring of budgets, as well as in a webinar that we will hold in the future on that topic. Alexandra from Iraq is asking if we will share documents about our collaboration with the World Bank. Yes, definitely, that will be forthcoming. Especially pay attention to our webinar at the end of September on public expenditure reviews. Again, the World Bank will participate with us, and we can ask them questions directly and share information. From Anjali in Nepal, we hear about the subnational level. Yes, we are developing guidance specifically for the subnational level and around decentralization issues. So stay tuned. And I've just gotten a series of messages saying that we have to close this webinar because the Executive Director All-Staff meeting has started. So in conclusion, I would like to, well, first of all, we will respond to the remaining messages in the text bilaterally via email. Thank you very much for all of those fantastic contributions. And thanks again to everybody who has participated and listened. We will, again, be sharing a link to the reports and to a video recording of this discussion in the coming days. We will also look forward to inviting you all to participate and join the PF4C community of practice in the coming weeks. And we will also be sending out an invitation to our next webinar at the end of September, which will be on child-sensitive public expenditure reviews. Thanks again very much for participating. If you have any additional questions, please feel free to get in touch with myself or Nima via email. And we wish you all a fantastic morning, afternoon, and evening. Thanks very much.